Good morning, everyone. How are you this morning? Thank you very much for coming to this presentation. I really appreciate it. I'm going to take some time to talk to you about lowering your total cost of operation with your parts strategy. And we are in a time of inflation, so getting our costs down is something that I think everybody in trucking is interested in. And I am the host of the Heavy Duty Parts Report. I'm also the CEO of the Heavy Duty Consulting Corporation, and we work with suppliers and distributors. But at the end of the day, I'm a parts guy. I've worked in parts my entire career, and so I'm really looking forward to having this conversation with you today. I think it's important that we start off from the right perspective, and this is how I look at it. The trucking industry is the backbone of society. Without the trucking industry, everything that we come to rely on for our way of life would come to an end. And people's lives actually hang in the balance. You think of medicine, if it wasn't delivered, how quickly people would start to get into some serious trouble. I don't know about you, but I like having heat in my home and AC in the summer. I like having clothes and food. Those are just the fundamental basics that the trucking industry provides all of us. But in addition to that, our entire way of life is really dependent on this industry. And so for me, the big idea, if you're in the parts and service side of the business, is that you have an obligation to do everything in your power to serve the people, the men and women who operate trucks, who are in the trucking industry, who are taking care of us. You have an obligation to do everything in your power to support them. And so at our company, that is what really is behind everything that we do. We have this core belief that heavy-duty people need to flourish. If heavy-duty people flourish and the trucking industry flourishes, then by extension, everybody flourishes. And if you can't find a bigger why than human flourishing, if you find one bigger than that, come and talk to me because I want to know about it. But to me, that is really what is truly important. So when you think about the last year was tough for a lot of people, right? Spot rates and contract rates were down. There was a freight recession. And then we had all of this inflationary costs where costs were just skyrocketing across the board. It really, in many ways, was kind of like a worst case scenario when you have all of these elements that are working against the trucking industry. And so what I saw fleets and owner-operators with shrinking margins, and it was a challenging year. And on the parts side of the business, we saw that. A lot of suppliers, a lot of distributors, their overall volumes were down in the second half of 2023. And that was a reflection of just less equipment moving less miles. And that was supposed to be an animation, but we'll just do it all at once. When it comes to this cycle of inflation, you end up getting a really vicious cycle. And it starts with inflation, costs start going up. And then you have this situation like we did last year where for many people, revenue was going down. And this was putting a lot of pressure. It was putting pressure at every level of the supply chain and the trucking industry, and especially people who are operating equipment then. What's the inclination when you have this happening, right? Costs are up, margins maybe are down. I gotta save money where I can save money. And so what I've seen over 25 plus years in business and seeing these cycles, in the trucking industry is that when this situation occurs, people start to look at, can they save money with parts? What if I spend a little less on the purchase price, lowering my cost? Is that going to help me out in the long run? And unfortunately, what ends up happening is, yes, you might save a little bit of money in the short term, but it inevitably leads to higher costs overall in the long term. And so this is something that I think I really feel for anybody that's stuck in that cycle. Because if you do have pressure on your margins, you're looking for ways to lower your costs, and having a guy like me come up and say, spend more on your parts, may feel a little counterintuitive. But we're going to talk about the parts strategy that we can use to really help and have that long-term view where we can actually lower our total cost of operation. And that was supposed to, yeah, there's a few mistakes here. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. So this inflation and this cycle that we were talking about, What makes it a really difficult problem to solve is that it does impact every level of the supply chain, not just the truckers. So what I saw happen is manufacturers, their raw material costs skyrocketed, their transportation costs went up, their labor costs have been going up, and so what do? Right? So the manufacturers, they raise their prices. The distributors, they're getting price files sometimes every 30 days from their suppliers. Prices going up. But their costs are all going up as well. Their delivery costs, right, running those delivery trucks, their labor costs, the parts costs, all of the costs that the distributors have been going up as well. So then they pass that cost on to the owner-operators and the fleets, the end users, right? Now, ideally, I guess what would happen is that if you're at that level, at the end user level, you then pass those costs on to the consumer if you can. But that's kind of fueling that inflation cycle, because then if everything goes up, it starts all over again. So I understand that this situation that we are in with these rising costs is a very challenging one, and there's really no simple or easy solution to it, and it really does affect everybody. So what I wanted to talk about in more detail today is really the only part strategy that works in the long term, that actually does result in a lower total cost of operation. And really, at the end of the day, cheap parts is not the answer. The purchase price is really the last thing you should be looking at. So the strategy that we have to look at is, and quality, I purposely didn't put high quality parts, because I think that's a word that everybody uses, and it's almost lost all meaning. So what we're really looking at is we're looking at high performing parts. And that performance has to work for your specific situation based on your equipment, what you do, where you work, and many other factors. And so what we're going to look at is I'm going to give you a couple examples, and we're going to talk about the importance of independent tests as opposed to just marketing materials. And we're going to talk also about keeping informed about innovative products that are coming onto the marketplace that really do help you lower your total cost of operation. And it's really the responsibility of the operator of the equipment now to keep up to date and to make sure that they're aware of these. And it's my job at the Heavy Duty Parts Report to try to find that information and make it available to you. So we're working together to identify the opportunities where these innovative products that are coming onto the market can be used to lower your total cost. So let's talk about independent testing to start. And I'll use friction material as just one example of why this is so important. So let me ask you a true or false question. All friction material is the same if it has a 23,000 pound rated lining. What do you think, true or false? Anybody? The answer is false. When you're looking at friction material, there's a lot of variables that you have to consider, and this is why I think it's really important for the actual operators of the equipment to really take ownership of this and educate themselves, because only really they know these variables. So here's the variables that their vocation, the road conditions that they operate in, and then also the driving style. So if you're an owner-operator, your driving style. If you're a fleet, the driving style of your different drivers. And all of those variables will come to be an important part of the decision that you make on your friction material. So when you think about those variables and you think about friction material, you have to spec the friction material to match those variables and to meet your needs and actually drive your total cost of operation down. And the problem that I've seen is, I'm just going to go back there, is that in the past, you relied on really knowledgeable parts people to provide you with this information, and you would go to your parts guy. But those parts people with 30, 40, and 50 years of experience, they're retiring en masse, and there's not very many knowledgeable people to replace them, right? There's way more of the people with all of those years of experience retiring than we have young people coming up through the ranks. And so when in the past you would rely on your parts person and you would talk to them about your situation and they would make a recommendation and then hopefully it would work out. But as I said, those people are leaving. So we have to be really careful about what is publicized about the different parts that we're buying, especially with friction material as an example. So we've seen fraudulent ratings out there. There was one, it was a private label program, 25,000 pound rated lining, and not only did that lining get blown apart in testing, but it wouldn't even pass the 23,000 pound rated test, and the ratings that were on it were actually fraudulent. It was coming from overseas. We've seen material that is promoted as high quality but is failing the minimum tests. And one of the real problems, especially in this category of product, is the fact that there's no aftermarket laws to really govern this. So really, as an end user, you can look at the marketing materials and it's all telling you it's high quality, but what is it actually doing for you in a performance perspective, and is it lowering your cost or is it raising your cost? The purchase price might be low, but again, what is it actually doing? And so I think this is why looking at independent testing is so important. And when you look at friction material as an example, there was an independent test done on these 3 linings. Now these 3 linings are pretty much recognized as being, we would call them high performance lining or premium lining, right? And each one of these companies is definitely going to have its own marketing materials. They're going to put their best foot forward when they're trying to promote their material to you. And you've got a decision to make. And so how do you make that decision? Well, you have to look at the real data, and you have to look at it in terms of how does that relate to the performance it'll give me, and what will that do to my total cost. So here's the results of the independent test. Now this was done in a lab, independent of these 3 companies. And when they did the test, they looked at how much material was used on each brake application. They did a certain number of applications, and every aspect of the test was identical. So the only variable was the friction material. And HeatStar became the baseline. It performed better than the other 2 linings. The ABEX lining was 31% of its weight, which is not just we're not just looking at the thickness of the material. In this particular test, they were also looking at the density and the performance characteristics that go along with that. And so if you look at the weight, it actually lost 31% more material than HeatStar. And then the Meritor lining was 52%. It was the highest. So if you looked at the marketing of these 3 companies, they're going to put forth the best that they can to try to market to you. But this independent test gives you an indication of performance characteristics, and then you still have a decision to make about this particular lining and say, okay, which one would be the best for my situation, for my vocation? And based on this performance, if I chose HeatStar as an example, what would that do for me for lowering my total cost? So maybe I'm spending more on the actual parts, but overall, this is lasting longer. I'm getting better performance. It's not wearing out all of my other wheel end components, and therefore it's driving down my total cost. So I really feel that as a parts guy, we should be telling you this information, but it's getting harder and harder to find people who understand these kinds of things and are able to communicate them effectively. So it really becomes the responsibility of the equipment operators to educate themselves where they can. Just give me a second here. So that's one example of why, in my opinion, the independent testing is so important, because I think it gives you insight into the products that you're buying. But another thing that I think is really important is to look at innovative products that are coming onto the market. So I'm going to ask you another true or false question. Extended oil life can be directly correlated to how well your turbocharger performs. What do you think? The answer to that one is true. And I'm going to talk about an innovative product that's just come onto the market. It's from a company called Switchblade Turbochargers. And I learned about them recently, and I think the product is really, really interesting. I'm not affiliated with them in any way, so I don't get anything out of it. But when I found out that there was a connection between the way a turbocharger performs and oil life, it really got my attention, because I realized that that actually is a factor in the total cost of this product, right? And what I think is really important when you look at an innovative product and you look at a new product that's on the market is you've got to look at who's used it, and what is their success, what is their experience, right? And if you can find people who have used the product that are similar to you, then you can also have confidence and not just rely on the company's marketing, but you're actually looking at some real world results. So this particular product, we asked them for some real world results. I didn't want to just accept their marketing, I wanted to be convinced. So they gave us some of their customers. Bloom Recyclers, they installed this turbocharger. Now this particular turbocharger is not a remanufactured replacement part, it's an actual retrofittable part. It's a new turbocharger that is designed differently, that you would remove your old turbocharger, you would put this new innovative product on, and then you would get specific results. And Bloom Recyclers, they actually saw that their fuel efficiency really improved by 30%. So they went from 4.1 miles per gallon to 5.9 miles per gallon. And they eliminated black smoke, and that's really important because that's fuel that was being put into the emission and is unburned and therefore not efficient. And they are right now upgrading more of their equipment based on the early results. So here you have this turbocharger. It's a completely innovative approach. It's a brand new product on the market, and you've got these fleets that are using it with great success. And I think it's so important when you're thinking about your parts strategy, not only to just do high-performing replacement parts, but to look for these opportunities to upgrade the overall performance, which drives down your total cost. Let's look at a couple more examples of users of this product. So this fleet, Blair Excavating, they gained 1.5 miles per gallon, a 20% improvement in fuel efficiency. Their fuel savings worked out to about $140 a day, which means that they were actually able to recoup the cost of this retrofit program, turbocharger within 30 days, so 1 month. So then you can think about that. For the rest of the year, they're making nothing but money on that. That's driving down their total cost by $140 a day. And then because of that, they're upgrading their fleet. Anderson Contracting, he's here today, and he also has a YouTube channel that you might be interested in following. But his experience with this, they doubled oil life. So going back to that question that I asked at the beginning, and you can think if you double the oil life, that's right, you're not using as much oil, you're not spending as much on labor, and that all brings your costs down. In addition to that, they also had the elimination of the black smoke, which means that it's burning more efficiently. There was less soot in the oil, and overall they've gotten excellent, excellent results with this innovative product. So they are actually here in booth 61181 over in the West Hall. And if you tell them that I sent you over there, they will give you a 20% discount on their turbocharger. When you think about the trucking industry, you think about how important it is, you think about the complexity of modern equipment, I really think that it is important that we work together to be able to try to put forth the best possible solutions for the owner-operators, for the fleets. And I know I moved through that information relatively quickly. Parts can be not necessarily the most exciting subject, but it has such a direct impact on the actual cost. And I've seen over years and years of selling parts where you get people on these high-performing products, it starts to work, and then over time, it's like that pressure to try to save money. They go back to looking at the purchase price of the parts that they're buying. And I just want to really encourage everyone to continue to look not at the purchase price of parts, but look at the total cost of operation. Look at the independent testing. Find innovative products that will actually drive down that cost. And if you do that, then you can combat some of the pressure that's being put on you because of the current situation with inflation. So the Heavy Duty Parts Report airs a new episode every single Monday. We talk about these kinds of subjects. We have over 300 episodes in our back catalog. I encourage you to go over to heavydutypartsreport.com and follow the show. We're going to continue to have this conversation and try to bring forward as much information as we can to try to empower the owner-operators and the fleets to continue to make decisions not based just on purchase price, but actually lowering that total cost of operation. thank you very, very much for your time and attention this morning. I really do appreciate it. And if you have any questions, I would be happy to discuss that with you. I hope that I've made you think about parts in a slightly different way. And I really appreciate the time that you took to come and listen to me today. Thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate it.